Okay. Welcome back to Hero Without Anime Review, episode number 4. Yep, fourth episode of the series, called Underground Dungeon. Now, this is interesting though, of all the series I'm watching right now that came out this month, this technically was released the last week of last month, but I managed to catch it pretty quickly. And we're on episode 4 already, like, really? 4 already? Yeah, already. So, basically, we start off with Ariel, Lilia, and Renaer celebrating Ariel's win in the guild competition, where he basically wiped the floor with the Black Bay guild team really easily. Though he had some tough time with a couple of them. So they have a feast to celebrate. They're back on top again, kind of. I think they may pay up most of the debts they actually had. They probably got bonus money, not only from the prize money they won, but also from all the gambling that Lilia. So, and also the fact that, well, she wants to marry Ariel. And that's a gag in this episode where it's like, he even massages his leg, and he's like, oh, fancy woman like me? Like, no, I fancy woman like Renaer. Like, Renaer's like, what? I don't have any feminine charms. And of course, basically, is like, looking at her like, yeah, you do with your big chest. Yep. And then after this, basically, Renaer and Ariel decide to basically spar. And then basically his father comes in, Rod, thinks that, oh, basically, because they won the competition, of course, he does explain, and of course, basically, she thinks like, oh, Ariel got married, and she's like, I didn't promise that. And then later on, it's like, oh, we had this sword competition. And like, here's the entry form. And he tears it up, but it turns out it was not the entry form. He easily sees the fact this is not that. This is a marriage certificate. Because Lilia really wants to marry him for some, basically she's very much attracted to him. And of course points out to her father that he can still basically use his sword skill despite having only one arm. But he's a dual swordsman. So, we don't see him again until toward the end of the episode. There's a reason why. So, and then of course you see him a couple more times. One basically for the next day, the other one toward the end of the episode. So, then Ariel awake, and basically Lilia sneaks into his room, wearing a nightgown, and she is going to seduce him by giving him wake-up kiss, which she easily detects right away, and then proceeds to use his own bedsheet to tie her hands to basically his footboard. And then he walks into Renaer's room, where I'm surprised he's not embarrassed the fact that basically that, well, a couple of her straps are down. Almost seems like if she basically got up, basically she could be like, but naked in front of him. And I don't think he would give a damn. And apparently he first was a daddy's girl. And then of course Lilia and her father get an argument about basically what she's wearing. And then of course basically, oh yeah, the fact there's a dungeon in the city. So basically Lilia, Ariel, and Renaer proceed to go to the dungeon. Lilia wants basically Ariel to himself and have Renaer go down a different floor. So he's like, I want Renaer to come. Okay. So basically, instead of like, oh, can we just get the 14th floor? No, it has to be the person who has been to that floor. Since he's never been to this dungeon, apparently he did not know what a dungeon was, or even the tournament. He's like how basic in touch are you? Well, you live down in the backwoods, so what do you expect? So, and then they go down to the first floor. Basically, him and Renaer basically battle the Armored Knights. Pretty interesting battle. It beats one of the over later. Oh, that's sad. Of course, he points out, Lily, you did nothing. Also asking what her class is. She's a fencer. And he points out, though, yeah, you're weaker than my mom. you're a weaker class, but not like advanced per se. We do see her sword. Yep. And then comes the guy who's supposedly injured from a trap, and then lead into a room where they get beamed to the bottom of the dungeon to battle a sword god. Which, of course, basically Ariel takes on and wins. Even the moves of a sword god, and of course he reveals to them like, "Oh yeah, my mom's a sword god." It's like, "What?" "Yeah. I thought she was a sword princess." "Nope, that was basically a cover." Yep. And she basically took all the moves. And she's like, she did not like the spotlight. That's the reason why she became sword princess. Yep. And by the way, we do see the fact that George is responsible for this little catastrophe, thanks to one of his guild members. Basically spilled the beans right away after the fact that Ario saved his life. And of course, Rod is drinking the bar, and then he hears possibly something happened to his daughter. And then George is like, and by the way, it's revealed that George is responsible for taking away Rod's arm. What appears to be his left arm he took? Yes, he took his left arm. He's like, first took my arm, then take my daughter, and then they just walked into to basically the pub they're in. He hugs her and basically like, you're responsible for this. It's like, would you stop me? And of course, basically we see him where he's like, he is throwing a hissy fit, basically smashed up at his office. And then we see this weird dark sword, which seems like the sword of Damocles, except it's not hanging up someone's bed. It's like tied to this doorway. The only thing that reminds me of sword Damocles, because the common picture I've seen of this particular sword is that it's a sword that hangs over someone's bed, and it's quite dangerous. The sword itself doesn't do much anything. It's more of a threatening lure. That's basically what I've heard of it as. Those of you curious where I've heard this from, I've heard it from many different series. I think it's from Greek mythology, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So, and think, oh, you have a grudge. I can help you. And George is like, who are you? Well, we'll find out next week. Quite interesting episode. It's like, yeah, we reveal who's responsible for giving Rod one arm. Of course, he does contemplate, maybe he can do stuff. And of course, Ira basically does test him, where, yeah, he's still kind of strong despite having only one arm. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a one-armed swordsman. Probably get him stopped. And they refer to him as the former boss of the Dragon Fang, even though he's still technically the guildmaster. Like, did his daughter take over from him? It's not really very clear, per se, about that. But otherwise, so, great episode. Yep. So yeah, that's particularly a particular review. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications. Next up, I'm going to watch some Doctor Who. I'm going to watch the last two stories of Fifth Doctor, and then finally start Return of Ultraman. Okay? Next video. Bye.